Well, I'm here with Bill, and we're doing this new series called My Story. And it's great. Bill's agreed to actually just talk and tell us a little bit about his story. So welcome. It's really nice to have you with us. So Bill, tell us about the very beginning. You know, when were you born? And tell us a little bit about your childhood and upbringing.
Well, I had not a very wonderful start to life because my mother died when I was a year old.
Okay.
My father had two children. My parents had two. My brother was 2 years older than me, and he was born in the Rhondda Valley in Wales, in Ferndale. Unfortunately, I was born in England.
Okay.
Because my father didn't like the working in the mines, he decided to go up to work in the Ford car plant in Dagenham. And consequently, when I came along, I was born in Dagenham. But as I say, he was working there, and unfortunately my mother passed away, and my grandmother came up to Dagenham and took my brother and myself home. And we were then living in the Rhondda Valley, as I say, in Ferndale. Not long after this, my father remarried. And according to my grandmother, she had TB when they got married, because TB was quite rampant in those days. And they had a child then who was called David Oliver, and he was brought up in Cornwall, where the grandmother's home, his grandmother's home was. And on the basis that my father would have nothing to do with his bringing up. So after that, my father went into the army. So basically, by the age of 6 years of age, my brother and I were without parents.
Okay.
But I had the most wonderful grandmother in the world. And her marriage to her second husband had produced a child who was some 20 years younger than my father. And he was totally ruined by his two sisters. He was smoking when he was about 8 years of age. They could do nothing with him. He didn't learn to read and write because he was so ruined. And this was the environment we brought in. My step-grandfather had a very menial job. He used to work on the ash carts, because in those days with all the coal fires, all the ashes were scraped out of the grates and put in a bucket and put on the pavement. And his job was to go around on the ash cart, and through that he picked up silicosis.
Okay.
And it's terrible. For years and years he suffered with severe chronic chest infection. So, but we had a wonderful childhood. My grandmother was an amazing woman. And unfortunately, when I was 8 years of age, I fell over the local quarry in Ferndale, fractured my skull, lost my memory, and have very little recollection of the childhood. But all I know, mostly from what my two girl cousins told me, I had a wonderful, we were never indoors, always out playing. And I can basically remember playing all sorts of games outdoors. And it was always a pain. For me to read a book was a nightmare.
Right, okay.
Real punishment. And although my grandmother was getting on, and she wasn't religious, she did indeed teach me to say a little prayer. There are 6 angels on my bed. There are four corners to my bed. There are 6 angels to my head, 2 to watch, 2 to pray, 2 to carry my soul away. And I kept that prayer going. Unfortunately, we live next door to the Catholic Church.
Okay.
Yeah, we're back in the Rhondda now, aren't we?
Yes.
we lived next door to the Catholic Church. My father and one of my uncles had been altar boys there, but she sent us to the local Baptist Sunday school.
Okay.
Because all the boys, there were about 200 young kids there. And it is wonderful. And in the church, there was a missionary who had been out in the Congo, where her husband died of a fever when they were out there. So she had to come back home. And Mrs. Jones-Mish, she was known, and she said, tell us these stories about Africa. And Africa was a magic word. And Sunday school was marvellous. And when I say I hated reading a book, I loved the Bible. And I just loved it up. And even my brother was a bigger anti-book than me, was interested in the Bible. We knew the scriptures, and it was a wonderful time. We had some godly teachers in the Sunday school. So anyway, we grew up, and the time came to school. I didn't like school, very naughty. We were naughty at home. How my grandmother coped, I don't know. On one occasion, she sent for the whipperine, who was the local one who picked up truants on the road not going to school. And he threatened to send us to a home, but didn't make any difference. How she survived to 74, I never know. We would tell us. And well known in the village, but one of the problems I had in life, apart from bad behaviour, was I had a foul tongue. Partly because my brother was a bully, and that had a big part of my life, I think. And I had this foul tongue that I just could not control. It got me into all sorts of trouble. Right through school, I didn't work hard at school. Made one big mistake when I got to Form 4. I managed to get up into the A stream, which was a big mistake because I began to realise the need of education, and I'd been working much harder. Got up into the A stream, and because I was right on the bottom of the A stream, I gave up interest and did very little work. Anyway, when it came to O levels, I had to take 2 goes to get 4 O levels.
Okay.
But fortunately, those 4 included the 2 Englishes and maths, which had a bearing on getting into the bank later on.
Yes, because was it in the time when if you didn't get maths and English, you didn't get anything?
Well, you wouldn't have got into the bank.
Yes.
So that turned out to be very important.
Okay.
Where was I? Yeah, and yes, it came to the exam. But fortunately, when I was in the grammar school, my grandmother knew the English teacher, knew her husband.
Okay.
And Nancy Buffton had me down in the front seat, right next to her.
Okay.
And that is why I got my 2 Englishes on the first go.
Right, okay.
And then we didn't have a very good maths teacher. He was brilliant at maths, but he was a poor teacher.
Okay.
So I had to get maths second time round. And of course, by the time I finished then, I was almost on the way to 18. I went into the national service and became a surveyor in the army and got involved with log tables and things like that and metrification. And I did enjoy the army, didn't get any promotion.
Okay.
But, and even in the army, my language was a problem because I was within, in the surveyors with boys who had been to university.
Okay.
Because in those days, you went to university without going into before going into the army.
Right.
Whereas if you went to a training college, you had to do your national service
First, okay.
after.
Yeah.
So I got it the other way around, I think. You had to
Yes.
go to university first.
Yes.
And it was a problem with boys who were much more intellectual than me, and it caused divisions and quarrels and stuff. Anyway, I had no control. So anyway, I enjoyed national service. It was being with family and friendship and camaraderie was brilliant. I loved the army. And anyway, came out. And during the army, when I went in before my 18th birthday, which was in October the following month. And with the intention of going to, because I had these 4 levels, of going to the Carmarthen College to become a teacher. And during the army, I had met someone who had been in the bank and decided I wanted to go into the bank. So when I came out, I applied to the bank and I didn't get in. So I took a job with the coal board and got a job on top of a colliery as a manager's clerk in Gethley Colliery and enjoyed that. But the coal board was dead men's shoes.
Yeah, yeah.
And by this time I had started taking my bank exam. I wanted to get on and try and get back into the bank. And 5 years after being with the coal board, with hope of no promotion, on the train going out to deliver the miners' night pays one morning, I met a lad who I had known, played football with before, who had started work in the National Provincial Bank. And he told me to, why don't you apply, go down and see the manager of the local Pontypridd branch and speak to the manager there, which I did.
Okay.
And I had an interesting talk with, because I'd failed 5 years earlier to get in. And indeed, I had a good interview, sent me up to London, had an interview there, and I got into the National Provincial Bank. And when I started in the bank, I decided I was going to do my bank exam.
Okay, yeah.
But then, of course, I started in Ponty, only there 5 months, and the manager in Narberth branch in Pembrokeshire had been sacked because he had embezzled the rugby club's finances. And so they sent me to Narberth. And when I was in Narberth, lo and behold, on March Day, one Thursday, looking out of the window, I saw this lady walking down the road who was quite attractive, and but she had a little girl holding her hand. So anyway, as it turned out, after several months later, I found out that it wasn't her daughter, it was her niece.
Okay.
So Anna Turner, one day, her and her younger sister came into the bank because they had these little savings boxes that they brought in to open, and I served them on the counter. And from that I learned that she was a baptized member of Margaret's Baptist Church. And so I asked if we could work for me, which we did. And from there, she became my girlfriend and then my fiancée. And 6 months later, she became my wife, Gaynor. And when we got married, I only had 2 exams, which I did when I was in lodgings in Narberth. But of course then, because she was a farmer's daughter and I was in a farming community, they had to move me out of Narberth and they sent me to Roath, Richmond Road in Cardiff. And anyway, so that was shortly before we got married in April '65. And so, of course, Gaynor moved to Cardiff. And I must say, considering that she could not see a neighbour, to come to a city, she settled wonderfully well. And Sean came along, and then Simon came along about 18 months afterwards. And she was wonderful because she looked after the children when I was studying.
Yes.
And one by one I got my exams. And then funny enough, when I was doing the last one, practice of banking, I used to go down to Keith's house, Keith Denison's house, and we did past papers together.
Okay.
And we both got through the banker's exams. And it is a wonderful feeling when on the night when they presented me with my Institute of Bankers tie.
Okay.
Yeah, and certificate. So that was the start of my banking career. And anyway, having got the exams, they couldn't say to you, you can't do this because you haven't got your exams.
Yeah.
It is a fait accompli. And from then, things started to move up. So it was quite extraordinary, actually, when I think about my beginnings, that I became an Institute of Bankers, and I then moved up through the levels and became a manager it was NatWest by this time, in NatWest Bank. And that was in Kincard, it was a local branch. And I was 11 years in Kincard, and then I went to I shouldn't have said I went to 11 years in Richmond Road.
Okay. Yeah.
And I moved up the ranks there, and then I went to Lakeside and became manager there. And 11 years there, 10 years in Kincard, and they moved me out of the bank for 2 years because they had been closing the coal mines.
Okay.
And because I'd been in the mining community, I don't know why, but the regional manager thought I'd be a good asset to go down and create business down in Roundbridge End, to create business to employ miners who'd lost their jobs. So I was there for 2.5 years, and then I came back into the bank and went to Newport. I was 5 years in Newport. The last 2 years were horrendous.
Right, okay.
Property values had dropped, and many of the accounts that were under my control came under the control of the regional office.
Yeah.
And the trouble with the regional office was that when they were involved, it was great. But when failure came, it was your responsibility.
Yeah, of course it was, yes.
And so the last 2 years made up for the previous 20.
Okay.
It was already.
Yeah.
I was working all hours.
Okay.
I've just realised, Richard, there was one important thing I had overlooked to say.
Okay.
And that was to say the blow when Gaynor, who had suffered for quite a long time with serious heart problems, actually passed away in 2003.
Okay.
And the huge loss that was to me and the family. But I must say how well God has helped to overcome that loss. His presence has been so wonderful, and the support. And it made the bearing of the loss so much easier to carry.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that.